ethnic, or the political issues that are driving the movement. There's social issues in terms of internal and external displacement, urbanization, social dislocations of all kinds. There are personal reasons. Could be education, could be for family, could be out-and-out wanderlust, although it's doubtful that you'd risk 6 days on the open boat for wanderlust alone. And the one I've left at the end, which reflects all of these, is economic. And I've left it to the end for a reason. Poverty, to a large degree, is seen as a driving force. And particularly in the north-south, with disparity of wealth as a principal driver of migration movements. However, we do know that the patterns are far more complex than that. And often, as I said, 75% of the African migration is actually inter-African. So there's a lot of inter-South movement that tends to get ignored. So I want to leave you with two central observations in terms of migration, whether it's irregular or regular. First of all, migrants move from poorer to more prosperous countries. I want to attribute that to Jeff Crisp, who is the head of evaluation and policy for the UNHCR. So it's more complex than just poverty. And as I said, for example, if we look at the Senegal example, the poorest people living in the center of Senegal, they're not going to Europe. They don't own TVs. They don't have the physical or financial access to get there. So you can find gradations of a poor population that are going and not going. So it's the ability to migrate, particularly to the north. And second, the second observation is national systems of migration regulation. So that's asylum, but other forms of regulation are being overwhelmed by massive numbers of migrants. So that includes asylum systems, but what it's leading to more and more has been more restrictive systems, and often those restrictive systems are violations of international law. The Italians can no longer pretend that when you take people off the beach in Lampedusa and they stick them in boats and they take them back to Libya, at the same time they maintain that there's a legal argument that they are respecting their UN Convention rights. It's just utter sophistry and nonsense. And the other thing that we're seeing is higher and higher borders. And often these high borders, they can be such things as patrols, Spanish and Italian patrols. The Greeks have actually said their explanation for the low acceptance rates is because they don't have the Navy to intercept the Afghans the way the Spanish and the Italians do. They've actually made that statement. So we're seeing higher borders with more technology. You might even think about that between Canada and the United States and what's going on here. The implications for asylum policies, greater complexity in assessing protection needs, who has a legitimate need of protection, who doesn't, and the need for protection is expanding and the capacity and willingness to protect is contracting at the same time. So, I'm going to finish up now. In terms of imperfect storm warnings, first of all, I'm very proud of that title because it contains all kinds of ambiguities. The first one is, does imperfect refer to storm? Is it the imperfect storm, or is it the imperfect warnings? Of course, I'm delighted to tell you that it's both. It's not a perfect storm. So in that sense, we'll get to George's wave in a minute. It's not at the point where there's an imminent collapse of the entire system of international refugee protection. We're not that bad yet, but we're in heavy waters. We have Fortress Europe, Fortress America. We have increasing interdiction policies. We have tepid international responses to massive human rights violations. If we just think about what's going on in Darfur and many other countries. And we have the failure to address fundamental gaps between rich and poor, north and south. The warnings are also imperfect, partly because this is a cartoon, it's a sketch. In 40 minutes, the incredible complexity of forced and regular migration is too hard to sketch out. There's another reason it's imperfect. It's because I've got no solutions. I'm not offering solutions at all. And in that regard, I'd like to quote Jerry Seinfeld. I got nothing. I'd also very quickly like to quote John Lennon. I'm not the only one. So that's where we are with solutions. In regard to solutions, we can say this. that there are some obvious solutions we can talk about, and many people would say, yeah, this is the pie in the sky stuff. But you've got the list of them up there. Massive increases for aid to in-transit forced migrants. More vigorous pursuit of the resolution of national and regional conflicts. Increased ground-level support for repatriation programs. More generous and intelligent resettlement programs. I said 100,000. That looks like a drop in the bucket with the millions and millions I was talking about who were in need. More honest and accessible asylum programs, and wider recognition of the core human rights of migrants. It's easy to say, it's not easy to do. Some of the starting points, and this comes back to you: more accurate mapping and understanding of migration itself, re-examination of asylum policies in the light of forced migration issues that I've mentioned, more honest identification of failures of international protection, because there's a great deal of dishonesty that's out there, greater effort to coordinate solutions. I'll give you a very quick example of that. When I say coordinate solutions, everybody's worried about being the nice guy on the block. They don't want to be seen as more generous. That's been a theme in Canadian refugee policy for years. Sweden, 2 years ago, accepted way more Iraqis than anyone else, got a lot of wonderful coverage. All of a sudden, they saw the flow, and so all the Iraqis were going to Sweden. They drastically changed their asylum policy in regard to Iraqi claims, and there was just a complete precipitous drop in the number of acceptance, just because nobody else was accepting them, and they didn't want to be carrying the cans by themselves. And lastly, closer integration of asylum issues with national trade, labor, demographic, and aid strategies. We know if there's really going to be asylum, Canada could be talking to Mexico in a lot of ways if they're worried about the 25% of the claim load that's coming from Mexico, which it is. So that's the end of the walking tour. I can bring it back home. Rather than, I can say this, rather than looking at ways to shut the door, which is what Minister Kenny is talking about, and increasing intervention, we really have to have a more honest, straightforward asylum system that works. We have to be a stronger proponent of international solutions and an integrated approach for Mexico, migration, trade, aid strategies, and the promotion of voluntary returns where there's support for that voluntary return rather than just sticking a person on a plane and letting them land in their own country with nothing to do. My final ambiguity of imperfect is that it has two meanings. One is faulty in various ways, but the other one is it's also incomplete in the grammar sense. So it's an action going on, but not yet completed. So my final confession is this has been a long-winded, sneaky way of saying that we've all got a lot of work to do. The current models of international protection are horribly inadequate. We need to chart and understand the forced movement of peoples much better. We need to identify the failures of protection more precisely, and we need to formulate and advocate more rational and effective solutions. So in order for George, here we are, to avoid this, we need to understand this. By the way, these are Kosovars, so many of these people have now found a solution, and we need to do something about this. And so there's a compelling need, there's a lot of work to do.